G'day, my name is Paul Nation. You should have a look at my website because on that website there are some very useful vocabulary lists and vocabulary tests that you can use. Today I want to talk about vocabulary and in particular about the vocabulary that learners need to learn. We'll look at how much vocabulary they need to learn and what kind of vocabulary they need to learn. When we count words, we can count words in two different ways. Here's one way. So, we look at a text and we can say, well, how many words are there in this text? And we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and count how many words there are in the text. So that's one way of counting words. And when we do that, we're counting what's called running words, because the words come running one after the other. Another way of counting words is to count different words. And when we count different words, we go like this. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here we have the word the. And when we come in the next line to the word the again, which is there somewhere, here it is, then we don't count it again because we've already counted that word. So that way of counting words is called counting different words. There are technical terms for these two types of words. When we count running words, it's called counting tokens. When we count different words, it's called counting word types. Now, if you want to check that you're following what I just said, think to yourself, if we have a text, will that text contain more tokens than types, or more types than tokens? If you answered it will contain more tokens than types, you are correct. Because when we count tokens, if the same word occurs again, we count it again. But whenever we count types, if the same word occurs again, we don't count it. So in any text, there are always more tokens than types. Now the interesting thing happens when we start to look at how often words occur. That is, each word type, how many tokens of that word are likely to occur in a normal use of English. Now here's a way you can get rich quick. Open a language school and advertise that in the very first lesson of learning English, your learners will learn 7% of the English language. And you can guarantee that. So when the learners come to the class, here's all you have to do. You simply have to say, the, T-H-E, repeat after me, the. And that doesn't really have any meaning, it just makes something special. End of the lesson. And because the learners now know the word the, they actually know 7% of the English language. Because this one word type, the, actually occurs 7 times in every 100 tokens. Now, if the learners at your language school are foolish enough to come back for the second lesson, you can tell them by the end of the second lesson, you will know 25% of the English language. And this is because the most frequent 10 words in English make up 1/4 of the tokens in any text. So that is, 10 different types make up 25% of the tokens in any spoken or written text. These types are words like is, the, it, and so on. And they don't carry a lot of meaning, but these 10 types make up 25% of the running words or the tokens in a text. 100 words make up 50% of the tokens in a text, and 1,000 words make up around about 80% or 85%, depending on whether it's written or spoken language, of the tokens in a text. So you see, all words are not created equal. Some words are much more important and frequent than other words. Now, the basic principle which lies behind this idea is that learners should learn words roughly in order of frequency in the language. And that means that they get the best benefit from the cost of learning that particular vocabulary. In order to make the vocabulary learning of a language more manageable, we typically divide the vocabulary of the language into 3 frequency levels. The first frequency level is the level of the high-frequency words. These high-frequency words make up around about 95% of the running words in any text, and there are 3,000 different high-frequency words. So by learning these 3,000 words, the learners get a very good start in being able to read and listen and to speak and to write. If they learn words which are not high-frequency words, they're not going to have much opportunity to meet or use those words, and that learning is largely wasted. So the first, most important level of vocabulary are the high-frequency words, and these are 3,000 words. If you want to see a list of these words, go to my website and you can find a list of the head words of the first 1,000, the second 1,000, and the third 1,000 words of English. The second level of vocabulary is what we call the mid-frequency words, and there are around about 6,000 mid-frequency words. The mid-frequency words make up around 3% of the tokens in any text. So you can see that if you learn the first 3,000, you learn somewhere around 90-95% of the running words. When you learn the next group of words you should learn, this is a group twice as big, 6,000 instead of 3,000, but they only cover 3% of the running words in a text. Now, these mid-frequency words are important once learners know the high-frequency words of the language. But they shouldn't be studying them or worrying about learning them before they know the high-frequency words. The third group of words is what we call the low-frequency words. And the low-frequency words is a very large group of words. It's hard to say how many there are, but they start at the 10th 1,000 and they go from there, because we have 3,000 high-frequency words, another 6,000 mid-frequency words, and then we have the low-frequency words. We don't really know how many different words there are in the English language. Probably, though, it's over 100,000 or somewhere around there. We do have a rough idea of how many words native speakers of English know. If you are a native speaker of English and you're about 18 or 19 years old and you might be beginning your study at university, then you probably know around about 17 or 18,000 words. The way to work it out for a native speaker is to use what we call a rule of thumb, just a rough rule. And the rule is this. For a native speaker, you take their age minus 2 times 1,000. And that gives you the number of words that they're likely to know. So if you think of a 5-year-old heading off to school, that 5-year-old knows around about 3,000 words. Because 5 years old, minus 2 equals 3, times 1,000 equals 3,000, so a 5-year-old knows around about 3,000 words. And we have tested this. There is a test called the Picture Vocabulary Size Test. You can find a link to it on my website, and you can find the test itself free for anybody to use on Lawrence Anthony's website. Just type in picture, vocabulary, size test, and you'll be taken to that website and you can download the test. Now, just to check that you're following, how many words would you expect a 9-year-old native speaker to know? Nine minus 2 equals 7 times 1,000 equals 7,000. So a 9-year-old native speaker is likely to know around about 7,000 words. This rule of thumb about vocabulary size for native speakers works up to about the age of 18 or 20 years old. And after that, vocabulary size increases will depend very much on what kind of study learners do, what profession they take up, and what kind of hobbies that they follow in their life. Because each of these hobbies and professions and so on usually have their own technical vocabulary, which will have to be learnt in order to deal with material in that field. So far we've looked at vocabulary from a frequency perspective. So that means you imagine that you do a frequency count of the language, you put some texts in and you get a list of the words which are ranked in order of their frequency, and then at the 3,000 level we divide off the high frequency words, and then we take another step to the 9th 1,000, so we have the 6,000 words which are mid-frequency words, and then we have the low-frequency words after that. Now, if we add the coverage of tokens of the high-frequency words and the mid-frequency words together, they cover around about 98% of the tokens or the running words in most texts and conversations. Now, this applies to reading. So that means if you want to read newspapers and you want to read novels and you don't want to be rushing off to the dictionary all the time to look up words, you need to know around about 8,000 or 9,000 different words so that there are only 1 or 2 words per 100 which are unknown to you. With spoken language, you don't need quite such a large vocabulary, but you still need a vocabulary around about 5,000 words, because if you know 5,000 words, that is the 3,000 high-frequency vocabulary and the 2,000 most useful words of the mid-frequency words, you'll get roughly about 98% coverage of the words in spoken English, such as in conversations, movies, TV programs, and so on. It's really important that a teacher understands that all words are not created equal, that words can be ranked according to frequency, and that it's most important to learn the words which are most important for learners at their present stage of proficiency. A lot of time can be spent on learning useless, low-frequency words which the learners will meet maybe only once a year or once every 2 or 3 years. The cost-benefit principle is really important when we look at vocabulary. There's another way of also looking at which words are important, and that is by looking at the needs and the interests of the learners. One of the ways that vocabulary researchers have done this is to make a list of academic words. And academic words are words which occur in all kinds of academic text, written formal text, such as secondary school textbooks and university textbooks and in manuals and so on. And there is a list of 570 words which is called the academic word list. And this academic word list covers around 10% of the tokens in any academic text. Now 10% might not seem a lot, but that means that if a line contains around 10 words, one word in every line will be from the academic word list if you're looking at an academic text. The academic word list provides very poor coverage of conversation and rather poor coverage of novels. Only about 2% or less of the words in novels are from the academic word list. So if learners know the high-frequency words, and then they want to say, well, what should I study next? Should I learn the mid-frequency words? It's actually better if they have academic purposes to go on to the academic word list. And they should learn those 570 academic words, because just by learning those 570 words, they will gain 10% coverage of academic text. And I think around 6% coverage of academic lectures. If they just went on and learnt the fourth 1,000 words, they'd be getting less than 3% coverage. So the academic word list is a very useful special purposes word list for people who have academic purposes. The next kind of word list for academic purposes is the technical word list. Now, there is no one technical word list because each subject area has its own technical vocabulary. Some of the biggest technical vocabularies are in the fields of medicine and botany and zoology. If you want to become a doctor, you probably have to learn at least 10,000 new words which are not in the high frequency or mid-frequency words of English. You have a lot of vocabulary learning to do if you're going to be a doctor. If you want to become a botanist and you want to learn the names of plants, or a zoologist and learn the names of living creatures, you've got a lot of vocabulary learning to do there. And a lot of the technical vocabulary of medicine and botany and zoology are not words which are commonly used in the language. Some technical vocabularies are very friendly technical vocabularies because they use words as technical words that people are already likely to know. So if you study our field of applied linguistics, some of the technical words in applied linguistics are words like language, word, sound, and so on. And these are words which are very commonly used in other areas of language use. We do have some vocabulary which is rather special to us as applied linguists, and these are words like phoneme and allophone, hapax legomena, words which occur only once, and so on. But this difficult, likely to be unknown technical vocabulary in applied linguistics is not very large. Probably about 20% of the technical vocabulary of applied linguistics, are new words which really have to be learnt by someone studying that subject. Even subjects like carpentry have their own technical vocabulary. I built my own shed. I never knew how to build a shed, but I wanted a place to store my tools and all the things that we will never use again in our lives. I wanted to put them in the boxes and leave them there. So I thought, well, I better build a shed. But I'd never built one before. So I read a book about building a shed, and I made a shed that looks a bit like a book. But, however, when I did this building, I found I had to learn new words. There are words like nog, dwang, safit, which are technical words of building, and all builders know these words. The technical vocabulary of a language depends on the history of that subject area. A particular subject area draws on the vocabulary which was used in the past in that area, and that becomes the technical vocabulary. Much of the technical vocabulary of medicine comes from Greek, because much of the early study of medicine occurred in Greece. Technical vocabularies are typically around about 1,000 or 2,000 words. If somebody knows the high-frequency words of the language, and they know the academic word list, then their next step should be learning the subject matter words, the technical vocabulary of the field that they wish to specialize in. And there are ways that teachers can help them to do this. So now we've looked at two ways of looking at vocabulary. We've looked at vocabulary according to frequency levels, and that includes high frequency, mid frequency, and low frequency words. And the argument has been that learners should first learn the high frequency words of the language, because these are by far the most useful and most usable words of the language. The second way we've looked at vocabulary is to see what kind of vocabulary can be applied for special purposes. There is a very special purpose vocabulary I haven't mentioned here, and this is for beginners of English. There is a survival vocabulary of around about 120 words and phrases that learners can use when they travel to other countries. And it takes about 3 to 4 hours at the most to learn this vocabulary. For people who are adults learning English, it's really important to make sure that they know the survival vocabulary. If you look on my website, look under publications around about 1991, and you'll find an article about the survival vocabulary. If you're going to travel to other countries such as France or Italy or Thailand or Indonesia, you can actually look on my website and find the survival vocabulary for those languages. Those survival vocabularies are free to download, like everything on my website, and you can quickly learn that vocabulary before you head off to the country. And when you get there, you'll be able to be polite to people, to ask directions, to buy food in the restaurant, to go to the market, and to do all the sorts of things that you need to do when you stay in a country for a short time. Now let's look at some of this vocabulary that I've been talking about. We have a text here, and that text has been marked up to show vocabulary from different levels. The words which are not marked in the text are high-frequency words of the language. And so in this text, it's words like private, had, very, few, group, for, the, only, one, mentioned. And you can see that many of the words in the text, and it's likely to be around about 90-95% of the words in the text, are actually unmarked. They are the high-frequency words. The mid-frequency vocabulary of the text is in italics, and so the words like outings, acute, wards, and so on, dentist, and these are the mid-frequency words of the language. They make up about 3% of the running words in any text. And the low-frequency words of the language, in this text, they're in capitals. That's optometrist. So you can see when you look at a text, that'll give you some rough idea of the kinds of words which are high frequency, mid frequency, and low frequency, and the rough idea of the various proportions of these words. In this text, I've also marked words according to whether they're special vocabulary or not. Now, the specialized words like academic words and technical words, they're not separate from high, mid, and low frequency words. Academic words can also be high frequency words. Some of them are also mid frequency words. Technical words can also be high frequency words, mid frequency words, or low frequency words. So we have our 3 frequency levels, but cutting across those levels, we can also have academic vocabulary and technical vocabulary. In this text, the words marked in bold are words from the academic word list. And you'll see that some of them, like modifications, accompanied, similarly, are also high-frequency words as well. The technical words are underlined in this text, and this text is about nursing and care of patients, and you'll see that the underlined words like resident, hospital, acute, ward are words which are closely connected in meaning to the field of nursing and patient care. You'll also notice that some of these technical words are high-frequency words like hospital. Some of them are mid-frequency words like acute and ward. And so words then can be both a technical word and a mid-frequency or high-frequency or low-frequency word. By now you should realize that one of the very important planning jobs that a teacher should do is to find out where the learners are in their current knowledge of vocabulary. Do they know all the high-frequency words or not? If they do, then the teacher knows it might be time to move on to the academic words or move on to the mid-frequency words. If the learners don't know all of the high-frequency words, how many of those high-frequency words do they know? Because this is very important when planning reading in an extensive reading program, because you need to know what level of graded readers your learners should be reading. There is a way to quickly find out what words your learners know. There was a test called the Vocabulary Levels Test, and I made that test many years ago. Fortunately, people have now made better versions of that test, and there are now 2 vocabulary levels tests available from my website. One is called the Updated Vocabulary Levels Test, and it tests the first 1,000, second 1,000, third, fourth, and fifth 1,000 words of English. You can easily give your learners parts of this test or the whole test to see how well they know the first 1,000, second 1,000, third 1,000, and so on words of English. You probably shouldn't give them the whole test, because that would be a test of 150 items long, and it's not necessary if they already know the first 1,000 to be testing them on the first 1,000. And if their proficiency is low, there's no real point in testing them on the 4th 1,000 or the 5th 1,000. So the idea behind the vocabulary levels test is that each level can be used by itself to get a reliable result of how many words the learners know at that level. There is another version of the vocabulary levels test, and it's called the New Vocabulary Levels Test. This also includes a test of the words in the academic word list. You should use one of these tests to find out how much vocabulary your learners know and whether they know the high-frequency words of the language. This knowledge is very important when planning language courses. The tests are free to download and they are very well researched. You'll find references to articles on my website which give you reliability, statistics, and various validity types of information about the tests. It's important to realize, though, that these 2 new tests are much better than the old levels tests, because when we made the old levels tests, we used old word lists because we didn't have new word lists. Now that I've made new word lists, it's possible to make much better vocabulary levels tests, and the ones on my website are therefore much better than the ones we originally used. So, have a look and use either the updated vocabulary levels test or the new vocabulary levels test to find out your learners' vocabulary knowledge and therefore see what kind of vocabulary they need to be focusing on in their vocabulary development. I hope you enjoy using these tests. I'm sure you will find them very useful.